So we have this HTML file already with a form, right? I could like start by saying form, etc. But since I am not going to submit the form anywhere, in this example, I'm going to stay in the same page. I do not open and close a form tag, because then I will require an action, and the action will send somewhere else. And if I want to block that action, I will have to return false. It becomes complicated. So for now, no form. No form, no submit button, no submit button. Instead of a submit button, I have a button tag. Instead of input type submit, I have a button. The button doesn't submit. It's just a button that I can use for whatever I want. Okay, that button says save info. Okay. So what we're gonna do, I already have here my functions.javascript being called in head. So what I want to do is that when I press on my button, I'm going to get the information written by the user and print it on the screen. So first of all, if I want to get information that is in there, I will require something like document.getElementById and get the value from that element, right? If I write here document.getElementById, right away we're going to have an error because the DOM is not loaded, because the object, the element, is not created. It will not find it. If I do it inside a window.onload, once the window is loaded, it's going to go look for that element, and that's not what I want. I want to wait for the user to fill it up, and when they click on info, then I want to look for that information, right? For example, this is JavaScript. Okay, if I start by saying window.onload equals function, and I try to get the ID name, document.getElementById name dot value. Okay, let's say that for now I'm just going to alert the value. If I do that, it will alert the value immediately after it's loaded. Immediately, ASDS, right away, right? If I actually click on enter here and I completely reset the page, it's empty. There's nothing in there. The first time there's nothing. When I load the page, it prints exactly what is inside. Nothing, empty. I don't want that. Okay? I want to wait for me to click on save to take an action. When I want to have something, some code waiting for me to be called, that's when we use functions. Functions are a piece of code that is not going to be executed. It's, let's say, an algorithm that will not be executed until I decide to call it. And I want to call it when I click on the button save info. So I have to wait for that action to happen. So I'm going to create a function. In this case, I do not want window.onload. I want to create a function. So a function is declared by writing function and the name of the function. For example, getInfo. The name of the function could be anything that you want. Okay. Now getInfo, then it can say document dot getElementById. It was name dot value. Okay, now I can alert that value, and this function will not be executed until I call that function with some kind of action. So here, Save, refresh, nothing happens. The function is there, but it's not being executed. I have to call it, right? A way to call a function will be just by writing it somewhere, like just to write it down like this. That will execute the function. Or by triggering it with some kind of action. For example, on my button I can have onClick equal the function. OnClick getInfo. So now when the user clicks on the button, we'll execute the function getInfo, which will go read the value inside name and alert it. Right? Button onClick getInfo. I put that inside the button when I click on the button. So now, for example, name John. I'll have to refresh this. Okay, John. There I call my function. It's not until this moment that I call my function. Okay, so now the objective is when I click on the button, I get all the values and then I print them. I'm going to show them inside the HTML. So I'm going to go one by one. I have the ID name, ID last name, ID age, ID address. So instead of alerting, I'm going to save them. Variable, for example, name equals name, the value of the input name. Variable last name equals document getElementByID, and the ID of last name is also lname, last name. Then I need the age. The ID is also age, and I need the address. That is, yes, also address. You do not have to name the variables the same way as your IDs. This is just a coincidence, or this is just for me to know that I'm talking about the same thing. But you can name this N, L, A, and AD. Okay, the name of your variable could be any name, right? In this case, well, I'm going to name them the same because it makes sense, right? I'm going to name inside name, in the variable name, I'm going to save the name. Inside lname, I'm going to save the last name. So it makes sense. All right, so I click on the button, I call getInfo, and I save everything that is inside the elements, the inputs. Now that I have that information, I can insert it into the JavaScript, the HTML. So now what I want to do is to get some element where I can insert my results. So I'm going to create another element here. I'm going to call it division, for example, ID results, close division, and that's what I'm going to insert my results, right? So now division is not an input, it's an element of type of this division that has an inner HTML, right? It doesn't have a value, has an inner HTML. So then I'm going to say document dot get element by ID results, and I'm going to insert there my values. Name, for example, name, just for now, name. So I'm going to get the name and right away insert it into the division results. So this is the inner HTML. Not the value, the inner HTML. So the name, John, and I insert John into that division. Okay? Now, let's say that I want to write something like, thank you, John, or whatever name, last name, thank you, John Smith. Your age is whatever age they wrote, for example 35 years old, and your address is whatever address they wrote, 101 some street, New York, New York, for example. If I want to write this message, then I will have to insert the whole message into the inner HTML of results. So I have to create that message. I have many options to do that. The first one, the more direct one, is by saying equal to the message. Thank you, space, plus the name, plus one more space, plus the last name. Thank you, John space Smith, plus more string. So plus a comma and say you are this many years, plus age, plus more string, so years old, plus, okay, and your address is plus the address. So I am concatenating the values that I got with some strings that I am adding to it, so I can insert it into the division. So everything is concatenated here. So now if I execute John Smith, age 35, and this is 254 5th Avenue, New York, New York. Thank you, John Smith. You are 35 years old and your address is the address. Now, the function is not executed until I call it. When I click on the button, then it takes the values from the input and inserts them into another division. What if I want to click on Save Info, insert that message, and get rid of the previous form? Just remove the form. Well, I'll have to give an ID to the whole form, so maybe the table will get an ID. Table form. And then just simply, after I'm done, document dot get element by ID table form dot. I can either remove the content, look, inner HTML equals to empty. That will remove everything inside it, inside that table. It removed the contents of the table, right? If I look in Firebug, the table is there, but there's no content. It's gone. The inner HTML is gone. Or instead, I can just change the styling of that table and hide it. So style dot display equals none. So I am going to hide the table. It will remain there, but I will just hide it. If I look now into the coding, the table is still there. Everything is still there. but the style of that table now is display none. Okay, so I can either get rid of it or hide it. I think it's better to hide it, because then if I want to get it back, I will have to create another button to say get back the table, and the function, what it will do, will change the display to block or inline or whatever display you want so that I can see it again. So a function will just display the table back. For example, here I'm going to add now plus a break and a button show table, show form. That button on click will have to call another function. So let's say the function show table. So I will just create that function show table, and basically show table will get the document by element, get the get element by ID, table form, style display, let's say block. So I'm going to insert a new button with an on-click action that calls show table. Show table changes the display to block. There's my button, show form, and I show it back. Okay. So now, if this kind of syntax, when you have to add a variable string, becomes complicated, you can make a chain. You can make you can call your variable many times and keep on concatenating values to that variable. For example, I'm going to create a variable here, results or result, which will be equal to thank you. After that, I'm going to keep on concatenating to result plus equal name. Right? So this is gone. Plus equal a space. Plus equal last name. Plus equal UR. So I have to recreate my whole string here by adding chunks of string into my result. So a result has everything. I can see it more clearly. Thank you, name, space, last name, UR, age, space, years old, space, address, years old, and your address is address, and then I add the button here. Everything is inside result, so then I just have to insert into the inner HTML of results equal result. Maybe that's a cleaner way of doing it, and you might not get so lost. I added the button at the end of the string because that's where I want to show my button. In this case, when I click on Save Info, my button is at the end.